How old are you?
I'm 21 years old.
And how do you identify?
I identify as a heterosexual male.
Where would you say you first learned about sex?
I learned about sex in 7th grade in my health class.
Are you sexually active?
Yes.
Approximately how long have you been sexually active?
I'm 21 now. Approximately 3 years.
Are you aware that the longer you've been sexually active and the more partners you had increases your risk for contracting an STI?
Yes.
Okay. And how much do you know about the risks related to sex?
I think I know a fair amount.
Okay. A fair amount. How much do you know about non-heterosexual sex?
I don't know too much about non-heterosexual sex.
It is necessary to ask about genital, oral, and anal sexual practices and if condoms or dental dams are used because receptive anal sex increases susceptibility to HIV compared with insertive anal sex. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Are you aware that it is also a possibility both in the homosexual relations and heterosexual relations to be exposed to HIV?
Yes.
And how did you know that you were, as you put it, a heterosexual male?
That's the thing. I can't really say when I knew. It was more of just, I guess, around puberty when, hormones started, kicking in and stuff. I guess just the fact that I was attracted to females and not really attracted to males. That kind of was what helped me decide. It's not like someone told me, oh, you're going to be attracted to this or that. It's more of a personal, I wouldn't even say choice, just something I just knew.
Did you feel that once you were coming into your sexuality that it was supported or encouraged?
Yes and no. I think yes, due to the fact that, like, as far as society goes, it would be a norm for me to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
But also no, because I kind of came from a more religious background, so that was kind of, frowned upon for premarital sex.
Did you know that 96% of adults aged between 19 and 64 years old identify themselves as heterosexual, 1.6 identify as gay or lesbian, 0.7% identifies bisexual, and 1.1 indicates something else or gave no answer?
I was not aware of that. No, I did not know that the percentage of heterosexual people was that high.
Do you think in your age group it's more normal to be heterosexual or homosexual?
I think there's been a shift compared to childhood. Well, when I was like a little kid, it was more frowned upon to be homosexual, but as time has progressed, as society has progressed, it's become more accepted. And I think as far as normal goes, there really isn't a set regulation for what is considered normal.
And do you think that as far as public schools go, we should be more inclusive of a non-heterosexual sexual education?
I definitely think we should be more inclusive because if people don't receive proper education on things, that just leads to them, in a sense, fearing it, and that fear fuels hate, and that's not what you want. With knowledge comes power.
How old are you?
I'm 23.
And how do you identify sexually, if you don't mind my asking?
I am a heterosexual female.
When did you first learn about sex?
Maybe like sometime in elementary school, maybe like 5th or 6th grade, I don't know.
Okay. How much do you know about heterosexual sex?
Quite a bit.
How about non-heterosexual sex?
Not that much.
Are you sexually active?
Yeah.
Were you aware that 35% of women who have lived with another woman have experienced physical abuse in their lifetimes, while only 20% of domestic violence has occurred with women who have a history of living with only people of the opposite sex?
No, I was not necessarily aware of that, although I've been kind of like, I've had that thought a couple times because of like people that I know.
Okay. And did you also know that among women who've had sex with women, the prevalence of HSV2 was only 45.6% in women who deemed themselves heterosexuals, 35.9% in bisexuals, and only 8.2% in lesbians?
No.
Do you believe that it is important to get tested, like have pap smears, get, your annual mammogram?
Definitely. Yes.
How do you feel about women not going because they feel like they're at a lesser risk?
I feel like they probably are undereducated and need to be aware of the slightest risk. And I think that some of them just probably don't care, don't believe that like they can be at risk. So I think it's just a matter of educating them that like anybody could be at risk.
You're actually correct, because the majority of surveys report that only 44 to 56% of lesbians have regular pap smear. Do you know how often you should be getting a pap smear?
I believe it's like every year because that's how often I get mine. I'm pretty sure.
And if you're at higher risk, it should be every 6 months. How do you feel about the lack of non-heterosexual sexual education in the public school system?
I feel like because it's becoming more prevalent that it should definitely be increased, seeing as though that's like becoming a major part of the population. So if people represent something but they're not being educated on it, like that can only cause some detriment to themselves.
If you don't mind me asking, how did you know that you were straight?
I just natural inclination, see a man, feel aroused. There you go.
How old are you?
19.
How do you identify?
Bisexual.
When did you first learn about sex?
Oh my god. I was like 9. I don't know. I learned about it really early.
Do you know where you learned about sex?
3rd grade. Yeah, so however old you are in 3rd grade. Some kids were talking about fucking, and we got to the point about what fucking is and how we all wanted to do it, because we were all horny little 3rd graders who didn't know what to do with any of that. So, I don't know, kids are weird.
Okay, are you sexually active?
Yes.
How much do you know about the risks related to sex?
A lot.
How much do you know about non-heterosexual sex?
A lot.
Were you aware that the majority of women, up to 87%, who report same-sex behavior have had male partners in the past and may continue to do so? 6 to 23%.
I didn't know the statistics, but that makes sense.
And did you also know that 13 to 30% of women who report having sex with women test positive for HPV infection?
Gross. No, I did not.
How long have you been sexually active, if you don't mind?
3 years.
3 years. Were you aware of the study regarding sexual orientation and mental health?
No.
Were you aware that women who sleep with women are at greater risk for suicide than heterosexual women? And they're also more likely to have a history of past suicide attempts, increased utilization of mental health services, and if they are adolescents, have higher rates of depression, suicidal ideation, higher rates of substance abuse, and more risky sexual behaviors?
I did not know that.
How do you feel about the lack of non-heterosexual sexual education in the public school system?
It's so frustrating. Because, like, it's so... I don't think it's the whole one man, one woman agenda that all the evangelicalists are preaching. I think it's more the status quo, and I think it should be changing, actually, in recent upcoming years, because it is becoming such a issue on the forefront of, like, society. But I think, for me, it was difficult to come to terms with my sexuality in some ways and more so in others, because it just was never discussed, and like obviously it was accepted, but I was never like, oh, this is how you like have safe sex with a girl, so like now I'm more inclined to do that. Like I think it definitely needs to be discussed more, because it would definitely help kids who are questioning their sexuality come to terms with it a lot sooner, potentially.
How did you know you were bisexual?
When I was, okay, well, I've known since I was like 12, because I used to be in love with my best friend, but I didn't know what bisexual was, and I knew I liked boys, so I thought there was no way I could also be in love with my friend who was a girl. But the first time I ever acted on it was my junior year, and I was talking to this girl I had met at a concert that previous summer, and she told me that she liked girls, and I had this epiphany where I was like, oh, I also like her, so she likes girls, and I think I like girls, so now we're gonna like each other. And that was the first time I like kissed a girl, the first time I dated a girl. Didn't like have like sexual anything with her, but like later did with other girls, but, like, that's not the point. And that was the first time I, like, felt romantically inclined towards someone of the same gender.
Do you feel like, as a bisexual female, of course, that you've had different struggles, especially with people coming to terms with your sexuality?
Like, the thing about being bi versus being gay or lesbian is people, especially from Boston, in a very, like, accepting, open community, like, if you say you're gay, everyone's like, cool, you're gay, awesome, just proud of you for coming out, like, good for you for taking that step. But if you come out as bi, there's a lot of stigma around that says, oh, you're bi-curious, like, you're just, I'm sure, like, you'll figure it out, you'll pick eventually, like, you don't really, like, you come across very few people who recognize it as legitimate sexuality off the cuff, because a lot of people are stuck in this mindset where you're either hetero or homosexual, and that is so annoying because everyone's like, oh, you kissed a girl, right, at a party drunk? I'm like, no, I've dated girls, I've fucked girls, like, so yeah, that's definitely difficult, because a lot of people confuse bi-curious with completely identifying as bisexual, and that was so frustrating.
Have you found a helpful, supportful community in college?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yay.
How old are you?
I am 18 years old.
How do you identify?
I currently don't identify as anything. I've never had a full experience with either man or a woman, so I guess I would say I'm bi-curious.
When did you first learn about sex?
I first learned about sex actually, I do remember this very vividly. I was in 3rd grade, and we were sitting at the cafeteria, me and my friends, and one of my friends was talking about how she came home from school one day, and she heard her parents making very loud noises in their bedroom, and when they opened the door and greeted my friend, she saw that they were naked, and she was like, what is happening, like, what's going on? And that's my first ever, like, knowledge of anyone ever having sex.
Are you sexually active?
No.
Okay, and how much do you know about the risks related to sex?
I know all about the risks of relating to sex, especially considering we're in college. It's a place where hookup culture is very popular. It's a place where bad decisions are typically made. So I do make sure to maintain my knowledge of how to have safe sex if I do have safe sex, and to make sure I take the precautions necessary.
Okay. How much do you know about non-heterosexual relationships?
I would say I know enough about non-heterosexual relationships. I have a lot of homosexual friends, such as my roommate. He gives me a bunch of stories about all the encounters that he has with other guys, and I mean, I feel that they are very different from heterosexual relationships. The chemistry of homosexual relationships, like, even if it's just a one-night stand, or even if it's just like a standard relationship, there are different variations of emotional levels, physical levels, like mental stability in homosexual relationships, considering the fact that heteronormativity is unfortunately a factor that our world is assuming, and that is part of the reason why I feel that homosexual relationships differ greatly from heterosexual relationships.
Were you aware that gay and bisexual men are at higher risk for sexually transmitted diseases and poor mental health compared to heterosexual men?
Yes.
And did you also know that they have a uniquely high risk for HIV infection, HPV, which is the human papillomavirus, viral hepatitis, and cancer?
Yes, I was.
Seeing as you're one of the lucky few who actually is aware of these risks, how do you feel about introducing a more homo-friendly sexual education curriculum into the school system?
It's funny you say that. I came from a high school that did not necessarily have a designated sexual education class.
it was kind of incorporated in the health class and we just talked about it for one section. But I think sexual education is one of the most important factors that all school systems in America, specifically in America, should have. A lot of America, specifically the South, focus on how you just shouldn't have sex and that it's all abstinent, which is not the way to go, because I personally believe that sex is a rite of passage for teenagers. It's something you need to know, something you must learn about before something bad happens, because you weren't educated on it. Like I said before, I believe that heteronormativity is a social construct that should be gotten rid of. And with that said, I feel that discussing the fact that, sometimes maybe there is sex between a woman and a woman or a man and a man is very important, because if you are taught at a very young age, or like at an age that you're unaware of what sex is, and you're taught that it has to be between a man and a woman, and then you start to have sexual or romantic feelings for one of your friends who is of the same sex, then you would personally feel like you're doing the wrong thing and you're not doing life right, which is not the way that any child or teenager should feel, especially in the corrupt society our world and country has regarding adolescence and sex.
One last question for you. How did you know that you were, as you put it, bi-curious?
I know I was bi-curious because I feel like part of the reason I'm bi-curious is because I'm a very open-minded person. I don't believe that things should necessarily have labels, but when they do, I feel like some people take longer time than others to define themselves. Obviously, being raised Roman Catholic, my parents are very religious. They're Filipino. A lot of the Filipinos are very religious. And unfortunately, the Filipino culture is homophobic. I was raised to believe that I'm supposed to marry a woman. I'm supposed to only date women, only have sex with women. But when I started growing up through elementary school and middle school, I found myself to have more female friends, and not necessarily do I think that just because you have female friends that you may be bisexual or homosexual, but I felt that because heterosexuality was pushed down my throat for so many years, and through like all of health classes, and like my friends who would always talk about, oh yeah, like these girls are so pretty and like I want to get with all of them, I started to believe, well, maybe there's like more to it, like maybe I do like guys in some sense of physical attraction, or even like mental attraction, or like romantic attraction. I start to see that I do find some men attractive. I've never acted upon it, but I am open to new things, whether it is sex or whether it's just like a hobby. But yes, that I do consider myself bi-curious because of that.
Thank you. How old are you?
18 years old.
And how do you identify sexually?
Pansexual.
And were you aware that in interviews with men and women aged 26, women who have had same-sex attraction were significantly more likely to have engaged in deliberate self-harm, or to have had suicidal ideation compared with women who had not had same-sex attraction?
No, I did not know that.
When did you first learn about sex?
Well, my parents gave me this book about how babies were made, and like, it was kind of scientific, actually. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, it was historic and brought the baby down the chimney. No, none of that. It's like, man and woman make this baby, and now it's a baby, and it explained the whole process and stuff. And I'm like, well, I was a pretty smart kid, so it was like, obviously it had to come from somewhere. But then, beyond that, I actually learned about the act of sex through, like, the internet.
How did you know that you were pansexual, as you put it?
Because I thought girls were hot. And then beyond that, I was just like, wow, gender is an illusion. I shouldn't leave anyone out of my attraction, because honestly, that wouldn't be honest to me. So here's this perfectly understandable label that means all. Congratulations.
How much do you know about heterosexual sex?
Relatively Relatively a lot, even though I haven't had any.
And what about non-heterosexual sex?
Basically the same. I'm actually really interested in sexology, and I research that in my spare time. So I know a lot, just haven't put it to practice.
Did you receive a lot of support when you came out as pansexual?
From my friends, yes. From my family, I never really came out in that aspect, so I couldn't say yes or no either way.
Did you know that women sleeping with women is a likely reason for increased risk of breast cancer?
I didn't know that, and that sounds definitely fake.
How long have you been a nurse practitioner?
I have been a nurse practitioner since 1997, so about, oh, wow, I can't do math. Wow, so I guess about 20 years now, almost.
Do you know about how many of your patients are LGBT?
I would say probably about 10%. I work in a suburban community. It's about, I'd say about 10% of my total population.
How often do your LGBT patients come for checkups like mammograms, pap smears, etc.?
Well, I try to encourage all my patients to come in for annual screenings. We talk about it in detail if they are reluctant to do it. So we discuss the pros and cons and, their risk. And if there really is an absolute need for them to do things annually. But for the most part, I work with a fairly educated group of folks, and they know that even though they may not be having intimate contact with someone of the opposite sex, that there are still screenings that need to happen just because of their innate personhood. So women who have breasts need to have mammograms to screen for cancer, and they need to have pap smears to screen for cervical cancer if they've ever been sexually active with anyone who may have transmitted the HPV virus to them. So we need to screen for those kinds of things regardless of if they're currently sexually active or not.
Would you say that your patients are well informed about the risks related to non-heterosexual sex?
I would say most of them. Some of my younger patients may not be as well versed about risks, and that could just be because of youth or lack of opportunity to discuss it. Again, we take everyone on a case-by-case basis, so the questions are asked at every well visit and any appropriate sick visits, and then we have an opportunity to discuss things as they come up.
How often do you believe that women should be screened for mammograms or pap smears?
So just this year, recommendations have changed. So the new recommendation is that if you are of average risk, meaning that you don't have a first degree relative who has a history of breast cancer, that those annual screenings start at age 50. Previously, it was believed that at age 40, those should start. So now the practice is up to the provider. Typically, at 40, I will still recommend annual screenings until such recommendations change and they enforce that it can't be done earlier than 50. I think screening is a good preventive tool, and there's always going to be that exception to the rule that someone may turn up positive prior to the age that the screening is supposed to start. So,
do you encourage getting annual HIV testing for all of your LGBT patients, regardless of whether or not they're currently sexually active?
I can't say that I'm as good at that as I should be. The ones who are not in monogamous relationships, absolutely. Some of them I have them do more than once a year if they change partners, especially if there's been any oopses. We always screen. For my patients who are in long-term monogamous relationships, I'm not as vigilant, just because, just like any other married couple, one would hope that they would not be having intercourse with anyone else, and so there would be no risk. again, we take that on a case-by-case basis. Not everyone is perfect. So if incidents happen, then we do the appropriate screenings.
You say you've been in this profession for about 20 years. Mm-hmm. Would you say that the handling of LGBT patients has changed from when you first started, when you were in school, to now?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, when I first graduated as a nurse, we were kind of right at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. And so a big part of my job was education about potential transmission routes, talking about ways to keep safe, because there really is no such thing as safe sex. We always taught about safer sex and ways to prevent transmission of disease. I think it's gotten a lot easier. There's more information available now with the advent of the internet, and I think it's more socially acceptable than it was a while back, so that it's discussed more openly. There's not as much of a stigma being homosexual at this point in time as there was, 20 something years ago. So I think it's better now. I don't think it's perfect. I think there are some providers who don't choose to avail themselves of the information that's out there. They could be doing a little bit better job by their patients, but I think for the most part it's getting better. As long as we keep, the lines of communication open, it can continue to get better.
If you don't mind my asking,
Sure.
How do you feel, what advice would you give to LGBT adolescents, in a college setting like here at Temple University?
I would say that the most important thing is making good decisions. There's going to be some time when you're going to be tempted to do some things that you may not have done before, or you'll see a really cute person and you're attracted to them and body parts start talking to you and you might do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do or something that's out of character. I would say take a minute, take a breath, and think about it. Make a good decision. If you choose to, go with that impulse, at least try to be safe. And I would say, above all else, make sure that you are protecting yourself. So that means taking good care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally. It means getting tested if you are sexually active, because just because someone says that there's no one else does not always mean that there's no one else. You want to always make yourself your priority. Keep yourself safe and you will keep your partner safe as well.
Thank you very much.
I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm.
I might not be the same, but that's not important. No freedom till we're equal. Damn right I support it.
Can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted.